You know that feeling when absolutely everyone loves something and you just don't? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a fascinating little piece of micro writing from a gardening blog to explore exactly that. We're looking at that really universal tension between popular consensus and our own personal taste. Because let's be honest, we usually assume that if something is incredibly unique, visually striking, and universally beloved, we're kind of obligated to love it too, right? But as we're going to see through the lens of one very specific houseplant, that is definitely not always the case. So let's dive into this incredibly honest diary entry from a writer named Ang. Right out of the gate, Ang takes a totally contrarian stance against a massively popular houseplant. And honestly, in a world where we're so obsessed with sharing what we love and agreeing with the crowd, there is just something so refreshing about someone stepping up and articulating exactly what they don't like, and more importantly, why. Ang isn't just being contrary to be edgy. They're recognizing a very real, fundamental disconnect between a popular item and their own internal aesthetic compass. All right, let's get into section 1, the aesthetics of aversion, a case study in personal taste. Meet the Oxalis triangularis. You probably know it as the purple shamrock. Now, according to Ang's notes, this plant commands a massive, highly affectionate following in the gardening community. People don't just tolerate this thing, they have a distinct soft spot for it. It's one of those staple additions to a collection that almost everyone just inherently gravitates towards and totally cherishes. And this sets up our central conflict perfectly. On one side, you've got the overwhelming consensus of gardeners who absolutely adore the purple shamrock. And on the exact opposite side, you have Ang, who rejects it completely. It really makes you wonder, why does one person look at a widely beloved object and just feel entirely detached from the hype? Moving on to section 2, the garden center dilemma, curiosity versus taste. What's wild is that this internal conflict actually plays out in real life for Ang all the time. Literally every single time they see this plant at the garden center, they stop and ask themselves, should I finally get it? It's a genuine, ongoing battle between aesthetic curiosity and innate preference. Because the plant is so popular and it is so visually distinct, there's this recurring temptation. We've all been there, right? It's that nagging FOMO, that feeling of wondering if you're missing out on something that everyone else just seems to get. But here is exactly what happens. While the plant definitely sparks curiosity, Ang's personal taste acts as this uncompromising, absolute force that ultimately wins out every single time. The pull of the crowd is super strong for sure, but that internal filter, it's stronger. And it's actually a fantastic reminder that just because we're curious about something doesn't mean we actually have to buy it. Let's look at section 3, the purple shamrock profile, anatomy of an intriguing plant. To really understand this aversion, we've got to look at the objective facts. Interestingly, Ang actually admits the plant is genuinely intriguing and even catalogs its unique traits for us. I mean, we are not talking about some run-of-the-mill green fern here. We're looking at deep, rich purple foliage, highly unusual triangular leaflets, this really structured growth pattern in sets of threes, and contrasting white flowers. Objectively speaking, Ang totally recognizes that this plant is doing everything right to be visually spectacular. But despite acknowledging all of those highly distinct features, Ang hits a total mental roadblock, plainly stating that the aesthetic simply fails to resonate. Quote, "The look just doesn't click with me." And you know, that is just a wonderful phrase because it completely removes the burden of logical explanation. You can list all the remarkable features of an object, you can acknowledge how unique it is, and yet, that final emotional connection, that incredibly satisfying click, it can still be completely absent. Which brings us to section 4, deconstructing the dullness, the equation of aversion. Let's unpack exactly why this specific foliage feels so unappealing to the author. Ang lays out this absolutely fascinating aesthetic equation. Okay, so you take distinct deep purple foliage, which is undeniably bold. Then you add well-contrasting white flowers, which introduces this dynamic visual pop. Yet the combined result? Paradoxically, it just feels, as Ang puts it, a bit dull. It completely defies standard design logic. High contrast plus unique shapes should equal excitement, but for Ang, the sum of those incredible parts somehow just flattens out into this unappealing, boring. And this breakdown perfectly demonstrates the core lesson of our explainer today: objective visual uniqueness. Even incredibly high contrast does not automatically guarantee a positive emotional or aesthetic response for every single person. You literally cannot math your way into loving something. Yes, the traits are distinct, but those traits do not mathematically equal personal appeal. Taste is just deeply idiosyncratic. What is vibrant and exciting to the masses can genuinely read as completely dull to the individual. Finally, Section 5, the power of personal taste, curating our spaces. So, this brief little diary entry from the interwebs actually leads us to a pretty powerful conclusion. Our personal taste acts as an uncompromising filter, and it rightfully protects our personal spaces from trends or group consensus that just don't genuinely serve our own joy. Think about it. Aang could so easily just buy the purple shamrock to fit in with a wider gardening community, or just to satisfy a fleeting moment of FOMO at the store. But by trusting that gut feeling of dullness, by allowing their personal taste to win out, Aang maintains an environment that is truly, authentically their own. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to consider for your own life. What is your personal purple shamrock? What is that one universally loved thing, whether it's a popular houseplant, a new piece of tech, or some huge cultural trend that your own taste proudly and uncompromisingly rejects? Honestly, embracing that rejection might just be the absolute best way to understand your own unique aesthetic. So keep trusting that inner filter.